I used to think loyalty mattered. That if you worked hard enough, stayed late enough, sacrificed enough of yourself, someone would eventually recognize your efforts. I believed in merit. I believed in fairness. I believed in people. I stopped believing the day Evelyn Hart stood on that stage and accepted the promotion that was supposed to be mine. My name is Clara Hayes, 30 years old, senior project designer at Eclipse Dynamics, one of the most influential tech companies in the city. Or, at least, I used to be respected there. Until Evelyn took everything I had worked for. We started in the same year. We sat side by side in open workspace cubicles, drinking cheap office coffee and laughing about how exhausted we were. I taught her how to file reports, how to speak to clients, how to make presentations strong and concise. I didn't see her as competition. I saw her as a friend. And then came the Orion Project. The project I designed. The concept I developed. The pitch I perfected. A breakthrough in predictive logistics modeling, something that could push Eclipse Dynamics 5 years ahead of every competitor in the market. I lived in that office for weeks. Slept under my desk more nights than I slept in my own bed. I poured everything into it. And Evelyn stole it. I remember the exact moment. I was sitting in the boardroom, waiting for my presentation time. Everyone was there, executives, investors, even the CEO. My heart was pounding, but I was ready. Then Evelyn walked in with my files, my presentation slides, my printed data packets, my designs. And she smiled, that politely sweet smile of hers, and said, "Clara had to leave unexpectedly, so I'll be presenting for her." Everyone nodded. No one questioned it, because Evelyn had already laid the groundwork. She had been whispering behind closed doors, planting doubts, subtle comments about my stress levels and burnout, making them think it was believable that I'd disappear. She gave my presentation. She performed my research. She claimed my work. And when the applause came, thunderous and congratulatory, I sat frozen in my chair, unable to speak, unable to breathe. My chest ached, not from shock, but from realization. She had planned this. Carefully, quietly, cruelly. The worst part? The CEO didn't even look in my direction. He didn't see me. After the presentation, Evelyn approached me with a gentle, almost sympathetic smile. "I know you're upset," she said softly, patting my arm like I was a child. "But this is how the industry works. If you want to succeed, you have to be willing to play the game." Play the game. In that moment, I understood something very clearly. I didn't lose because I wasn't good enough. I lost because I was honest and Evelyn was strategic. And strategy always beats sincerity. So I walked out of that boardroom with my head high and my heart burning, the applause still echoing in my ears like mockery. That was the day I stopped believing in fairness. But it was also the day I promised myself something. If Evelyn wanted to play games, then I would learn to play better. Only unlike her, I would make sure she never saw the checkmate coming. Because the thing Evelyn never understood was this. I built the Orion Project. I know every component, every flaw, every vulnerability, and every way it can collapse. And I am not done. Not even close. The days that followed Evelyn's promotion were quiet. Too quiet. People moved around the office as if nothing had happened. They congratulated her in the hallways, brought her coffee, complimented her innovative breakthrough on the Orion Project. They acted like the world made sense, like everything was normal. I saw the looks, though, the sideways glances, the hesitant pauses when I entered a room. No one asked how I was. No one acknowledged what had been taken from me. No one wanted to get involved. Cowards. Still, I kept my composure. I smiled politely. I thanked coworkers when they offered meaningless words. I pretended to move on. Because revenge works best when delivered in silence. Evelyn hadn't just stolen a promotion. She had reshaped how the company saw me. My absence from that meeting proved I was unstable, emotional, unreliable. She controlled the narrative before I even realized there was a story being told.
Fine.
If she wanted a narrative, I would give her one. A better one. One she could not escape from. But to destroy someone effectively, you must understand them. So I started watching Evelyn. The first thing I noticed was her routine. Every morning, she arrived at 7:45, perfectly styled, holding a vanilla latte with oat milk from the cafe 2 blocks away. She always greeted the receptionist by name. She always paused to compliment someone's outfit, someone's work, someone's mood. Always soft. Always sweet. Always calculating. The second thing I noticed was her weakness. She needed validation. She needed to be admired. She needed to be praised. She didn't just want success. She wanted to be worshipped for it. That was leverage. And leverage could be built into a trap. The third thing I noticed was more important. She wasn't working alone. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind to retrieve old design notes from the archive system. The office was dark except for the glow of security lights. I moved quietly through the cubicles, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor. I reached the glass conference room and froze. Evelyn was inside. She wasn't alone. Across the table sat Director Philip Marlowe, one of the senior board members. A man whose approval could make or break careers. Their voices were low, but not low enough. Clara was never a threat, Evelyn said, tapping her pen against the table. She was talented, yes, but talent is useless without ambition. Philip chuckled. And you certainly have ambition. Evelyn leaned forward. What I have is vision. You saw it. You believed in me. And now the board does too. She reached out and took his hand. Not in a friendly way. Not in a business way. In a way that made my stomach drop. So that was it. This wasn't about work. This was never just strategy. This was manipulation in its purest form. Evelyn didn't climb to the top. She let someone carry her there. I stayed hidden behind the wall, hands shaking with anger I did not allow to surface. Not yet. I had learned my lesson. Emotions reveal intentions. Intentions reveal strategy. I remained silent. When they finally left, I entered the conference room. The faint scent of Evelyn's perfume still lingered, floral, delicate, poisonous. I sat where Philip had sat. I stared at where her hands had rested. I pictured her wearing my success like diamonds around her neck. Everything clicked into place. Evelyn stole the Orion Project because she needed a win powerful enough to secure Philip's backing. With it, she gained influence. With influence, she gained status. With status, she gained control of the board. And with control, she erased me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy layered over strategy. So I adjusted mine. The next morning, I returned to the office at dawn. I logged into the internal database, accessed archived drafts, backup revisions, email logs, timestamps, and metadata. I didn't touch original documents. I didn't alter anything. I only collected. Because while Evelyn stole the final product, she could not rewrite history. Every design iteration I created was stored. Every timestamp proved authorship. Every email thread confirmed development. I had evidence. But evidence means nothing if presented at the wrong moment. To break someone publicly, you let them think they are safe. So I waited. And watched. And planned. Revenge is not anger. Revenge is architecture. And I had just finished drawing the blueprint. The office buzzed with the usual morning chatter, coffee machines hissing, keyboards clattering, phones ringing. But for me, Clara Hayes, it all felt like a theater, a stage set for a performance only I could orchestrate. Every smile, every nod, every meaningless pleasantry from my coworkers was a piece of scenery. Evelyn thought she had won. She thought I was finished. She had no idea the trap had already been laid. I moved deliberately through the cubicles, nodding at familiar faces, exchanging polite words. No one suspected I had been there late into the night, collecting proof, tracing emails, noting vulnerabilities in her network. I had a dossier now, not just of her stolen work, but of her habits, her dependencies, the weaknesses she displayed to the world. Every compliment she sought, every board member she charmed, every subtle manipulation was documented. Step 1. Sow doubt. Step 2. Manipulate perception. Step 3. Deliver the inevitable collapse. It was already in motion. I started with small nudges. Anonymous notes to keyboard members highlighting inconsistencies in project milestones, quietly forwarded emails showing her subtle manipulations, leaving no fingerprints of my involvement. Every piece of data was factual, impossible to dispute. But the way it was presented painted a picture far different from the one Evelyn had carefully curated. She was brilliant, charming, persuasive, yes, but reckless. Overconfident, vulnerable to exposure. I watched her reactions like a hawk. Subtle eye twitches, forced smiles, the way she unconsciously adjusted her posture when certain names were mentioned. I noted it all. I memorized it. I used it like ammunition. Then came the psychological stage of the trap. I arranged an informal review meeting, a casual gathering, they would think, to celebrate the Orion Project's early success. Invitations went out quietly. A few hand-picked team members, including Evelyn, along with Philip Marlowe, were invited. She arrived early, radiant as ever, projecting the confidence she had always relied on. She didn't notice me entering behind her, clipboard in hand, smiling politely as if I had simply returned to normal routine. "Morning, Evelyn," I said, my voice calm, professional, almost disarming. "I've prepared some additional data on the Orion Project. Thought you'd want to review it before the meeting." Her smile faltered, just a fraction. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me to see. Already, the trap was tightening. The meeting began. I let her take the lead, presenting the project updates she thought were her own. I kept my comments minimal but strategic. Carefully phrased questions, casual observations, suggestions that planted seeds of doubt. Nothing direct, nothing that could be traced to me, but the subtle cracks were forming. Then came the next layer. I had discovered a loophole in the project's early testing data, something small, something she overlooked in her rush to claim credit. I presented it innocuously, as if it were an innocent observation, and watched her reaction. Her eyes widened slightly, just a fraction. A flash of panic, quickly masked. The board noticed it, of course, and their curiosity was piqued. Philip leaned forward. "That's interesting, Evelyn. Did you account for this in your projections?" She smiled, but it was strained. "Yes, of course, I interrupted gently, almost deferentially. "Actually, I cross-checked the data with the previous iterations. There's a discrepancy in the predictive modeling that might affect the next phase. I can walk everyone through it if you like." The room went silent. All eyes were now on Evelyn. Sweat formed imperceptibly at her temple. Her confident facade, the one she had worn like armor for years, began to crumble, ever so slightly. It was enough. I stepped back, letting her flounder just enough to panic internally. She tried to regain control, rattling through slides, smoothing over numbers. But the seed was planted. Doubt, fear, vulnerability. The final layer of the trap was yet to come. I had already scheduled a confidential meeting with the board, using anonymous memos and carefully timed emails. I did not need to appear as the whistleblower. No, the evidence would speak for itself. The logs, the metadata, the timestamps, the emails, every bit proving I had been the true architect of the Orion Project. Evelyn's downfall was not my act. It was her own design, her own ambition, her own arrogance, exposed perfectly to the people who had once been her allies. I merely orchestrated the stage. By the time the meeting ended, Evelyn was visibly shaken. She tried to smile for appearances, but I saw it. The tightness around her eyes, the subtle trembling of her hands as she packed her notes. She didn't see me smirk, a quiet, self-assured curl of satisfaction. I was still Clara Hayes, the woman she had underestimated, the woman she had tried to erase. And the trap was set. The real game, the one she would never anticipate, was about to begin. Because while she thought she had climbed to the top, I had already started pulling the strings. Every flaw she had shown, every desire she had displayed, every person she had manipulated, I knew it all. And soon, very soon, she would realize that ambition without cunning, power without foresight, and theft without awareness leads only to ruin. And I would be there to watch it happen. The boardroom smelled of lemon disinfectant and expensive coffee. Morning light cut across the polished table in stark lines, as if the room itself were divided between truth and lies. Today was the day everything I had arranged would finally align, not by chance, not by anger, but by the quiet architecture of evidence and timing. I sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, my dossier under the folder I carried like a talisman. The invitation I'd engineered had been vague. Project review, confidential. Philip Marlowe arrived first, grinning as if he already owned whatever verdict would come. Evelyn walked in next, breath even, hair immaculate, wearing the armor of someone who assumed she'd already won. They didn't expect me. That was always the advantage of being invisible long enough. People forget the shadows until the lights hit. "Thank you for coming," I said when the room settled. My voice was calm, practiced. I requested this meeting to review some anomalies in the Orion Project's development logs and to clarify authorship on several key deliverables. Philip raised an eyebrow. Anomalies? He glanced at Evelyn, a look of curiosity that could quickly become suspicion if fed correctly. I smiled politely and opened my folder. Yes. There are inconsistencies between the implementation timestamps, repository commits, and the presentation materials currently attributed to Evelyn. I have compiled a chronological audit, cross-referenced with archived emails and design revisions. I placed a clean printout on the table, a timeline that read like a confession. 2 weeks later, another stack detailed metadata tied to my user account. Another page showed internal drafts with my comments in line, with dates and version numbers. The final piece was an annotated comparison of the drafts with the presentation Evelyn gave, every unique approach, every specific formulation of the algorithm, every phrasing that had been called her insight traced back to my drafts. The room went quiet. The hum of the HVAC became audible. Evelyn's smile faltered, noticeably now, to everyone. Philip reached for the papers. He read. His face, which often resembled polished granite, shifted in a way that made me feel a small, controlled vindication. Curiosity gave way to dread. "This is highly detailed," he said slowly. "Where did you get these records?" I let the silence fill the air for a beat longer than comfortable. "From the archive systems, internal backups, and from email metadata that shows authorship traces. Nothing altered, all original timestamps. If you'd like, I can have legal validate these on record." Evelyn recovered her professional posture and launched into a rehearsed defense. "There must be a mistake. The team adapted the concept, yes, but the final design was a collaborative effort. Clara contributed, of course, we all did, but the strategic pivot that one executive backing was my contribution." She spoke with the practiced cadence of someone who had spent years convincing people to believe her narrative. But narrative bends under pressure when facts press from all sides. I put my hand flat on the prints. Collaboration is valuable, but credit must reflect reality. The metadata, the email chains, and the timestamps show a consistent authorship pattern. The design iterations credited to Evelyn after the board meeting are revisions that build on original work I developed months prior. Philip's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up, suddenly more reserved. "We'll need to escalate this to compliance," he said. "HR and legal will need to review the repository logs. If the data checks out, then the company needs to rectify attribution and handle any misrepresentation." I watched Evelyn closely. Her face had gone pale. She opened her mouth, closed it, then forced a laugh that sounded entirely patronizing. "Clara, are you trying to sabotage me out of spite?" "Not sabotage," I answered, voice steady. "Clarification. Accountability." We all knew what that meant. Rescindments, reputational damage, possible disciplinary action. In our world, where titles were currency and visibility everything, those were not small things. But there was more. The trap was not merely the archive paper trail. The final nail was the social architecture I'd built over the previous weeks, the seeds of doubt carefully scattered. Key stakeholders who mattered were already primed. An anonymous memo had gone to compliance last night with specific questions paired to logged evidence, one more confidential message, and the compliance investigator I discreetly cultivated would call for an immediate audit. I had done the math. I had timed it so that the audit would hit the board within hours, not days. Evelyn had no time to rewrite narratives, no time to cultivate witnesses, no time to manufacture alibis. Time was the fulcrum I'd turned. Evelyn stood abruptly, papers rustling. Her voice trembled now with something like fear. "This is slander. You have no right to." Philip held up a hand. "Let legal handle the procedure. If these are legitimate system logs, we must follow protocol." The meeting disbanded with a formal shuffle of chairs and clipped, controlled words. In the corridor, executives whispered. I watched Evelyn move like someone navigating a dream she couldn't wake from, her vanity stripped thin by the spotlight of evidence. Outside the boardroom, I found her in the glass-walled atrium, arms wrapped around herself as if to stave off the cold. She looked smaller than she had on stage. Her mascara had smudged at the edge of one eye when she thought no one saw. "You made your point," she said without looking at me. "What do you want, Clara? Applause? A parade?" I kept my voice neutral. "What I want is acknowledgement. I want what I built to be recognized. I want the truth to matter in this company." She laughed, but it was a brittle sound. "And if the truth doesn't matter, the board can be persuaded. People forget. They forget the loud," I said. "But documents don't forget. Logs don't forget. Backups don't forget. And compliance can make sure records match reality." Evelyn's face hardened. "You think you've won because you can prove authorship. But the company values optics. I have Philip. I have relationships." "You have what you paid for," I replied. "But influence collapses when it's built on untruth." Over the next 48 hours, the audit unfolded like a careful unspooling. Legal verified the metadata. Compliance confirmed the timestamps. HR interviewed team members and a handful of formerly indifferent colleagues, the ones I'd quietly briefed, spoke in neutral tones that carried weight. I remember Clara leading that round. Clara's draft was the foundation. Their testimonies were not dramatic. They were small nods that, together, made a dossier impenetrable. Evelyn fought. She submitted amended statements. She reached out to allies. She tried to reframe her role as collaborative stewardship. But the more she flailed, the more her maneuvering resembled the guilt of someone pinning a label on a crime they'd hoped to disguise. The final moment came in a short, stiff email from HR. "Pending the results of the ongoing audit, effective immediately, the Orion Project presentation credit will be amended. An investigation into professional conduct has been initiated." Evelyn's title remained, for now, intact. But the elevation, the applause, the assumed invincibility, had cracked. She no longer moved through the office as if the world owed her adoration. She moved like someone under observation, someone whose future hung in balance. I should have felt triumphant, the kind of high that replays like movie music behind your skull. Instead, I felt a precise, measured relief. The victory I wanted was not to watch someone burn. It was to restore truth and to reclaim pieces of myself that had been misattributed and trampled. In the days that followed, some colleagues offered quiet apologies, not grand declarations, but small reassurances, a shared look, a returned smile. The company revised its press materials, updated the project credits, and included my name where it had been missing. That public rectification felt small and enormous at once. Evelyn's downfall was not cinematic. It was procedural, bureaucratic, surgical. Her opportunity for dramatic revenge slipped away the same way she had engineered my erasure, subtly, with the cooperation of systems designed to preserve facts. On a rainy Friday, after the project credits were corrected and the warding-off chaos had calmed, I stood by the window in the design lab, sipping a coffee that tasted excessively ordinary. The city outside looked the same as it had before the storm. People flowed through crosswalks, emails pinged in inboxes, designs iterated, and drafts were saved. Life continued. I thought of the mantras I'd once clung to: loyalty, fairness, merit. They weren't dead ideals. They were tools, vulnerable but recoverable. I had not been the first to be betrayed, and I wouldn't be the last. What I had learned and what I had applied was how to translate injustice into a plan, how to make evidence sing, how to set the stage so truth would have no escape. I placed the dossier into a drawer, where it would sit like any other completed file. It was a strange act, closing that chapter. The file was not revenge in the melodramatic sense, it was restoration. It was the world acknowledging the correct story. As for Evelyn, she remained at the company for a while, shielded in part by political ties, chastened in part by circumstance. Some nights I would pass her in the hallway, and she would look away, eyes down, as if embarrassed by having once worn her ambitions so brazenly. I never glowed. There's no satisfaction in rubbing salt into a wound where the law has already salted the truth. The real satisfaction is quieter, when the record is right, when credit is where it belongs, and when your own work can breathe again without being smothered by someone else's applause. Checkmate, I thought, not a shout but a quiet, internal acknowledgement. The board had seen, the systems had remembered, and the story had been corrected. And as I returned to my desk to open a new draft, this time, with my name already on the header, I felt that old, stubborn belief return, that talent paired with strategy can survive treachery, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply reclaiming your life and continuing to build, louder and truer than before.